Welcome students. We are going to discuss about the agrarian classes in India. The agrarian class structure may be defined as a category of agricultural activities that form the occupations of the people of an agrarian society. An agrarian class structure is one where the society is primarily involved in agriculture. In this session, we are going to discuss about the views of Daniel Thorner on agrarian classes in India. In this lesson, we will be discussing on history of ownership of land in India, the major works of Daniel Thorner on agrarian structure, most important agrarian classes in India, particularly tenants, landlords and laborers. The agriculture during the olden days became a narrative of humankind's growth and cultivation of processes for producing food, feed, fiber, fuel and other goods by the systematic raising of plants and animals. In the beginning, human beings were hunters and gatherers, and later the agriculture has developed with due course of time. We are going to discuss about the history of ownership of land in India. The control of land came into being in the post-Vedic era because during the Rig-Vedic era, the Aryans were pastorals and domestic animals was the chief indicators of wealth. Private land ownership was not recognized at that time. In the post-Vedic era, due to utilization of iron equipment in agriculture, people started living one place. Therefore, before 3500 years, the land ownership was based on the community and there was no model of individual ownership of land. During the Maurya era, political philosopher Kautilya was in support of the king's control over all agricultural land. But he did not back the notion that the king should be owner of all the land. According to Gautam and Manu, if a plot of land resides under control of a person for 10 years or more, then it becomes his asset. Yadaya Vallabha extended this period to 20 years. Then Vishnu, Narad, Brihaspati and Gadyanan made the period of as 6 years. Mitaksara law in the 11th century increased the moment of time period to 100 years, and under Smriti Chandrika in the 13th century it was increased to 105 years. From the above historical developments, it is obvious that the concept of individual ownership of land could not be challenged any further. So, one can uncover that during the commencement of the ancient period, there was community ownership of land. End of the ancient period, the pressure was on the kings and individual ownership of land. And under the idea of individual ownership of land, the person who received a gift of land from the king could hand it over to farmers on patta. Based on this, it appears that since the early Middle Ages, there were more than one claimant for land and each had legal backing for it. The Muslim sultans established in North India during 12th century, and a change in the pattern of land ownership took during that period. The sultans divided the land into three parts. The first was Khalsa, land which was directly under the sender. The second was Yakta, which was given to the officers in lieu of their salary. The officers were expected to take their salary from the revenue generated from the land and return the remaining to the sender. The third type of land was donated to scholars and priests. As ample land was available, the question of ownership of land was relatively less threatening. During the British period, the subject of land ownership once again came to the front position. In the beginning, all the land belonged to the ruler and revenue collection was based on contract. The maximum bit of area land was given to the right to collect the revenue. After trial with several models of revenue collection, Governor General Cornwallis accepted the zamindars had the right of ownership of land and the ownership passed from father to son. The concept of auctioning came to prominence when a zamindar failed to give the promised revenue on time. The traders usually purchased the lands of the zamindars during the auction. The downfall of industries can be seen during the British period, and for the traders there was no safer investment than land. The zamindars choose to live in the cities and the problem associated with absentee landlordism started due to their lifestyle. The question of land was discussed in detail at the Constituent Assembly and Parliament after independence. India decided to make the land distribution more just and equitable. It is a democratic republic. Due to the pressure of the sender, the state governments passed the Zamindari Abolition Act and other similar acts to bring about some regularity in the ownership pattern of land. After the abolition of Zamindari system, the zamindars were given compensation of their land and it was distributed to among those who had been tilling them. The Zamindari system was abolished in most of the states by 1956. The pattern of land ownership changed from community ownership in ancient India to individual and then to king's rulers ownership. In the British era, land became a saleable product and excessive land revenue was extracted from farmers. In independent India, the laws of land ownership were framed to ensure that each farmer had a minimum amount of land with him, but this target could not be reached. Although some of the disparities in land ownership were addressed over the years by movements such as Bhudan and Gramdan, there are still many with large tracts of land and many more that are landless, while it remains to see how skillfully the government handles social inequality arising out of uneven distribution of land. An empathetic approach is sought from the big landowners. The major works of Daniel Thorner on agrarian structure. During the year 1952, Daniel Thorner wanted to do research on India's changing agrarian structure. He found usable data on who actually worked in the land. What was the product of the land? Division of product among land. What was the division of product among those who owned and those who worked? But he couldn't find the essential data on agrarian structure of India. Then he visited the libraries and proceeded into villages to analyze the need of agrarian relationships and its existence and operation. He visited many villages in all states and regions of India and asked questions directly to the villagers as to who owns the land, who works on it, what the product is, and what is the percentage of share is received by the persons involved. Thorner visited somewhere between 75 and 100 villages all over India. People told the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Thorner's hope behind asking the same question is to describe and analyze the network of relationships among the various groups of persons who draw their livelihood from the soil. The agrarian structure is not an external framework within which various classes function, but rather it is the sum total of the ways in which each group operates in relation to the other groups. Major agrarian classes in India. In rural India, one can observe the three agrarian classes, and they are landlords, tenants, and laborers. A human being cannot simultaneously belong to all three of the above categories. Let us suppose that a person owns a few acres of land. The cultivator tills a part of the land and a part of himself, and he may also lease out a part of land to a tenant or a crop sharer. For the time to time, he may work as a field laborer for one of his more substantial neighbors. Thus, he is a landlord and a tenant, a cultivation owner and an agricultural laborer. The practice of absentee landlordism is widespread in some parts of Andhra, Tamil Nadu and Bihar, where the landlord's holdings are let out to tenants. Several layers of tenants is prominent in Bengal, where the system of several layers of tenants and subtenants is followed between the zamindars and the man who actually plough the soil. A great variety of jagirdars, imamdars and other holders of large estates under specially privileged tenures is still found in the former enormous states. The home of powerful self-cultivators of small and medium-sized farms are in Punjab. In practice, Punjab has large numbers of attached servants paid in kind with a share of the products. This characteristics of fourfold structure of Janmis, Kanamdars, Verum Patamdas and Cherumas is more in the Malabar region. Despite wide regional variations, they may be grouped as proprietors, working peasants and laborers. It would be good if one could use the terms Malik, Kishan and Mastur. The term Malik or proprietor may be referred to a family whose agricultural income is derived primarily from property rights in the soil. That is to say that whatever other source of family funds may exist, such as from a profession or business, the main agricultural income is derived from a share of the produce of lands belonging to the family. One would class the tiller as a Malik if his agricultural income is from the part of his holdings which he cultivates with his own lands is less than the amount of he receives from renting out of his lands or having them tilled by hired laborers. The observation of Thorner is that many proprietors today exploit their holdings simultaneously in both of these ways. That is, they give out part to tenants or crop sharers and reserve part to be worked by hired laborers. The issue of economics shows the distribution between income derived from the performance of labor and income derived from the possession of property as an older and more fundamental than the conventional division of income into wages, rent and profits. An individual may possess various lands under more than one type of tenure. In a major share of land, half of the land's income serves to meet the major shares of the family's expenses or at least the expenses of those members of the family resident in the village. Any one of the family members may act as manager or supervisor, but none is required to work with his hands in the fields in order to assure the family's sustenance. The Malik or proprietor will enjoy a high type of property right in the soil. The Malik may hold directly under the government, or he may be a superior tenant with rights of occupancy, transfer, mortgage and inheritance protected by law. Within this group or class or Maliks, it is possible to separate out two subgroups. One consists of large absentee landlords who typically have holdings in more than one village. The second consists of smaller proprietors who reside personally in the village in which they own land and usually exercise some degree of management and control over its cultivation. The members of the second class, whom we may call Kisan or working peasants, have also a recognized property interest in the land. They may be small owners or tenants with varying degrees of security. Kisan's legal and customary rights will be somewhat inferior to those of the Maliks in the same village. The chief distinguishing feature, however, is the amount of land held. In the case of the working Kisan, the size of the holding is such that it supports only a single family, and then only if one or more members of the family actually perform the field labor. The fact is the entire produce from the land owned by the Kisan may not even provide the needed income required by his family, but may provide a large share than whatever funds the tiller may receive from the other agricultural sources, such as doing labor on other people's land. The definition of the word Kisan means the people living in the village who live primarily by their own work on their own lands. The agriculturists do not employ labor except for a short period in the ploughing or harvest season, nor do they commonly receive rent. The third rural classes or laborers or Mazdoor comprises those villagers who gain their livelihood primarily from working on other people's land. Families in this class may indeed have tenancy rights in the soil or even property rights, but the holdings are so small and the income from renting them out comes to less than the earnings from field work. Wages may be received in money or in kind. We may divide rural India into three main classes: the Maliks or proprietors, the Kisans or working peasants, Mazdoor or agricultural laborers. The key to the division is the amount of actual labor contributed to the production of process and the share in the product. In practice, the lower ranks of croppers and tenants at will are almost very similar from Mazdoor. They will definitely be included in this category. An individual to receive agricultural income without performing field labor must have property rights in land. Just what are these rights? What responsibilities and privileges do they require? How they arise? One needs to analyze the particular form of land system that was followed that served to legitimize the right of one group of holders to a share in the produce of the land, whether or not they engaged personally in the productive process. The descendants of the original, that is the privilege of receiving agricultural income without necessarily performing agricultural labor. Holder has the right to retain the existing power purchased and enjoyed by others. It tended to become progressively more separated from the actual tilling of the soil and even from residents in the village. The individuals who started as moneylenders, in many cases, in the best position to buy up or exclude the ownership and tenancy rights which the British Land Action had made manageable and thus to establish themselves as agricultural properties. The commitment of the moneylender was thus inherited along with the property right, and moneylenders did not actually become proprietors themselves but came to share with the proprietors the privilege of drawing income from agriculture or more precisely from agriculturists without doing agricultural work. Within a village, the resident maliks and moneylenders form a small and quite distinctive group socially. A handful of 6 or a dozen families are from Brahmin, Thakur or other high-ranking caste. Alternatively, as in Andhra, they may be members of respectable cultivating castes like the Kamas, Reddis or Raus. These dominating caste people live in larger houses, wear finer clothes and eat better food than the rest of the villages. Those people will be in a position to send their children to higher secondary schools, subscribe newspapers, listen to radio, own bicycles. In brief, the Kisans have originated primarily from cultivating or artisan castes. The Mastur are primarily from Harijans, scheduled castes and backward classes. The above hierarchical structure of interest in the land is very essential to maintain. As a result, persons who perform no agricultural labor were reserved quite a considerable proportion of the produce. The mechanism for the enforcement of this withdrawal of the great bulk of the product from the primary producers was provided by the new body of written law, the courts, the bolis, the dissemination of ordinances and so forth. In the end, the working Kisan was left with no surplus to invest in better implements, improved seeds or fertilizers, and in any case, no real incentive to increase his productivity was available. Now we are going to see the summary of this title. Dear students, this presentation discusses regarding the ownership of land from the post-Vedic era. The particular era shows that pastorals and cattle was the main index of wealth. Individual land ownership was not prevalent during that time. In the post-Vedic era, due to the use of iron equipment in agriculture, people started staying in one place and perform farming. During the British period, the land was considered by the rulers as revenue and collection was based on contracts. The British rulers experimented with several models of revenue collection. The then Governor General Cornwallis accepted that the zamindars had the right of ownership of land, and this ownership passed from father to son. After independence, zamindari system was abolished. In India, agrarian classes are classified as landholders, tenants and laborers. Thank you very much.